Last night I beat Silent F and I have some feelings. This was one of my and like a lot of people's most anticipated game of the year, and there was a couple of reasons for that. For number one, the fact that the Silent Hill 2 remake was not a complete fucking flaming disaster. That game was actually pretty decent, and I know that caught me and a lot of people off guard. Second, a lot of the pre-release material for this game was really kind of fucking sick. Even if you've beaten F at this point, go back and watch the Silent Hill F tease trailer. There's a bunch of scenes in it that aren't in the game, and it's just horrifying and beautiful and great. And then thirdly, this was penned by Ryukishi07, the guy behind the Umeneko series and the Higurashi series. Very famous and well-regarded visual novel horror writer, and so yeah, there's a lot to be excited about with this one. In a lot of ways, Silent Hill F has a kind of like impossible task in front of it, because it both seems like it's the first attempt to carve out this new identity for Silent Hill, while also keeping like old school Silent Hill fans happy, which is difficult because I don't know that there is like a trinity of games that is more beloved than the original 3 Silent Hill games. Some people like 4. I like 4. I think it's interesting. It's just incomplete. And now that I have beaten it, okay, let's start with the protagonist, Hinako, right? Hinako is this schoolgirl who exists in 1960s Japan. Hinako herself is really interesting because she is very much like an independent thinker, kind of her own person, not super interested in like what society wants of her or what the proper way for a young lady to act is. And the main way this manifests is through her friendship with this other character, Shu, who's been her best friend since they were little. They call each other like partner, and they have this Space Wars game that they both engaged with, and kind of seems like they kind of still do. And I think what you really get through their relationship is this idea that they are both kind of holding on to childhood through each other. And Hinako is just great. Like, she really just feels like an actual person and is very like competent in a way that I think a lot of other Silent Hill protagonists are not. And yeah, I loved her. The entire game takes place in the town of Ebisu Gaoka, which has so many syllables that I got it wrong several times while trying to record this bit. The entire game takes place in the town of Ebisu Gaoka. The entire game takes place in the town of Ebisu Sagoka, which I am definitely pronouncing that wrong, but I've read it too many times and I want to keep going. The entire game takes place in the town of Ebisugaoka. The entire game takes place in the town of Ebisu Sagoka. God damn it. And the town itself is just like beautiful. It is this kind of rural mountain town in 1960s Japan that gets like covered in first this strange fog and then later this like red flower. I think it's called a death lily or something like that. Following the flowers comes just these grotesque like organ-like growths that begin to take over the town, and it's really like horrific and beautiful and just like a really, really great setting. And I would say in general, the art direction in this game is fucking phenomenal. Like, the creature designs, they're all like very singular and frightening and like uncomfortable to look at. But then when you see like where the game's going and what it's trying to do, they take on like all these new meanings, and they're excellent. I think one thing I would say though is that I wish there was more. I feel like this is very much a game with a limited budget, and you can see it in a lot of ways, but one of the biggest one is just the lack of variety in the monsters. There's a major story boss later in the game who is basically just a slightly different version of a pre-existing monster, and stuff like that is disappointing. But I think it's still, in terms of like aesthetically, an amazing game, and like even the animation is so good. Like the way the creatures move, like they're so like just fucking weird and unsettling. The like jerky movements of the dolls, or the way like this other enemy that looks like basically just a bunch of like doll heads clumped together. It kind of moves like a little kid playing hopscotch, and it's just so weird and frightening. And I really loved all that stuff, as well as how much they like characterized Hinako's anger through like her animations and voice acting. Like when Hinako swings a pipe, she looks fucking pissed. Like she is so full of rage and anger, and it works because like she is this girl who is having like her identity kind of repressed by, you know, her friends, who like kind of, there's some kind of bullying going on, and then like her father is like this horrible abusive asshole, and so like when she gets to actually tee off on a monster, you see that rage come out, you hear it in the voice performance. And I played in Japanese, and I would have to say like the voice actor for Hinako, like the guttural screams and like the way she's kind of able to go back and forth between someone who's like so full of rage, but then someone who is just kind of chill and just trying to go her own way, like it's excellent. It's so good. And I would also say like the animations make the combat feel great. So like when you're smacking a monster with a pipe, you are really feeling it. Like you're seeing how the monster reacts. There's a nice little bit of hit stun, or like hit freeze, I guess, and like you can feel Hinako really like putting her entire body into the attacks. What I would say though, and like this is kind of where some of the more negative opinions I have on this game come in, there's a big difference between combat feeling good and combat being good. And I think what it comes down to is ultimately there's a lot more going on with this combat system than you might think. There's 4 different meters. There's sanity, focus, health, stamina, and then a 5th one if you want to count weapon durability, because like your weapons just break in this game. And there's also like multiple different ways you can attack. There's like counter attacks, there's witch time dodges in a Silent Hill game, which is just fucking insane, and then there's charge attacks. And the combat is definitely more involved than you would think it would be, but what I would say is that like despite everything that is going on, I never felt like the combat was forcing me to make like interesting decisions. There was never a point where like I really felt like, oh, I'm going to do this, which is going to result in this. It was mainly dodge at the right time, charge at the right time, and just beat the shit out of most enemies like that. I played half the game on hard and half the game on story, and I played on hard because I enjoy hard games. I just think they're fun. But around halfway into the game, I just felt like all the hard was really doing was padding out the enemies, so sometimes they just kill me extra quick and they would just soak up so much damage, and I was like, you know what, I think I might enjoy this game more on story mode, and so I switched over. And I did, and I'm guessing that someone is going to be weird about that, but what I would say is you should always be seeking to play games in the way that you enjoy the most, and that's what I do. And I think what's disappointing is that, like, with a lot of old survival horror games, every bullet was like a decision, you know, whether you want to engage a monster or run past it, they were all decisions. They all tied into like your larger strategy for how you were going to unlock the puzzle box of this world. You know, like if there is a zombie and it was in a hallway that you were going to be going back and forward through, then you kind of thought about it and you're like, okay, I think that's worth the bullets to take it out. But if it wasn't, it was like, okay, I'm going to run into this room, which is like a dead end but has an item I need, grab the item and run back out, you know? And like there's a lot of little decisions that came with classic survival horror like that, and if you're expecting to find that in Silent Hill F, you are going to be very disappointed. There is none of that in this game. Like this game is very much, it plays much more like an action game than it does a horror game, and unfortunately, like, I don't think it's a very good action game either, and that's why for me, like, the part of this game that really let me down was the general, like, game design and the combat design, and even just, like, the horror design. And what I mean by that is, like, in a lot of horror games, you are getting through whatever enemies you need to, but then you're also engaging in these set pieces that work as, like, these scary moments. So take Silent Hills 1 to 3. when you in the first Silent Hill, one of the first things that happens to you is like you go down this like alleyway, and all of a sudden you get this crazy Dutch camera angle where the camera is above you and it's disorientating and weird, and then the camera sweeps and all of a sudden like right in front of you is a crucified body against like a chain link fence, and it's so shocking. And then you're attacked on all sides by just nightmare children who like stab you to death. It is nightmarish. It is so scary. Silent Hill 2, you're exploring the apartments, you come out of a stairwell, and to your right is fucking Pyramid Head. All that's separating you and him is just these bars, and he just stands there looking at you, and it's so frightening and scary. Silent Hill 3, you have the mirror room. Heather goes into a room with mirrors, and next thing you're walking around, and the mirror in the bathroom mirror in front of you, your reflection stops moving and looks at you and starts rotting and peeling away, and then the room you're in starts rotting and peeling away. Set pieces like that make horror games, and there is so little of that here. There is one really good one right in the middle, or right towards the end of the game. It's in the house level, we'll call it, and it involves a giant head, and that's all I'll say. I thought that was fantastic. I would have loved to see more of that, because there really wasn't a lot. But what there was a lot of was long corridor mazes filled with monsters that you have to fight your way through. There's even sections of the game where like text comes on screen saying destroy the monsters. And I think what happened is that I don't think this game had a massive budget. I don't, that's just me speculating. And the way they padded out its length is with these long kind of dungeon sections. And in these sections, like the puzzles didn't really click with me. A lot of the time I really just was unclear about what I was meant to do or how those puzzles were kind of working. And sometimes I'd even bumble through them without understanding the solution. And look, if you want to say that's because I'm a fucking moron, fair enough. But I think by the end of the game, I was so bored of its combat and just waiting for it to be over, to the point that I'd say, like, yeah, like the combat is streamlined in a way that is going to feel familiar if you're used to modern games. Like this combat has more in common with like God of War than it does classic horror games. I could not wait for it to be over. Like I was just really just playing the combat to get to the next cutscene. And I understand, like the original Silent Hills, combat in them wasn't great either, but it felt like there was a purpose and function. And they never lost the feeling that you were exploring an environment with kind of meaning, whereas I feel like that feeling gets lost constantly in this game, especially when you enter like the other world stages, which really, like there's parts of them that are absolutely beautiful, but so much of them is just running through narrow, nondescript corridors filled with monsters, and it's really disappointing, honestly. Especially in light of, like, there's a couple of sections in the game where you're just allowed explore an environment without monsters. And I feel those sections work so well. There's one where, like, you're looking through the house of a doctor, and the doctor, he's involved in this weird kind of culty business going on in the village. And I think just, like, going through his home and experiencing, like, the environmental storytelling was fantastic. Same with the school level. I thought that was probably the best designed portion of the game, and I really enjoyed that. And I just think far too much of this game is playing to the weakest parts of it, which I think is its combat. So that is really disappointing. And I think that's also why, like, it's surprising to me that I think this is still going to be one of my favorite games of the year. And what that comes down to is the story. The story of this game is fucking phenomenal. One of the best stories of any horror game I have ever played. If someone was to say to me that this is legitimately their favorite Silent Hill story, I would think that's absolutely valid. You know, it took me a little while to lock in, but there's a cutscene right in the middle of this game, and for the people who've played it, it's the ritual, and my jaw was fucking agape for that entire thing. I could not believe what I was watching, how far it was going, and what it was saying about these characters. Because ultimately, like, I don't want to spoil anything here, and I'm not going to get specific, but I guess what I'd say, what Silent Hill F is about, it is about this idea of murdering your old self in order to become what society wants you to become. And the way it illustrates that through horror is so harrowing and powerful. Like it's nightmarish and it's beautiful and it's insane. And like for as much as I didn't enjoy the gameplay of this game, those were the moments that like I was right back in. I just had to see what was going to happen. I wanted to see what happened to these characters, and I just loved it. I would say, if you get to the end of the game and you see the first ending, that is basically nothing. Even if, like, I was not going to go play through it again, so I just watched the rest of the endings on YouTube. And where it goes and what it says with some of those endings is so, honestly, like, profoundly beautiful. I think really just so powerful and so interesting. There's a letter in one of the endings, and the letter is, like, really slight, but I think at its heart, it's about how Hinako has affected another character in this game and what this character now thinks is okay because of Hinako. And I just found it just like extremely powerful and just an incredible, incredible story. Ryukishi 07 killed it, and I really want to go and play more of his games now because I am floored by how good this story is. I loved it. And so yeah, that's ultimately like my feelings on Silent Hill F. I think people are going to enjoy the gameplay sections more than I did. I think a lot of people just won't care, and they'll just love the fact that the story and characters are as good as they are. And that's valid, you know? I think for me though, even though like there's quite a lot about this game I didn't like, I ultimately think that this is the right direction for Silent Hill, because ultimately, if they do a Silent Hill F2, and just to be clear, I don't want another game with Hinako or this village or anything like that. I want to see like a new thing again. Like what is the next thing we can do? Like different setting, different characters. Let's see. And if they can bolt an actual compelling horror game onto that, you are talking like, that could potentially be one of the best horror games of all time. And I'm so excited for that. And I'm happy this exists, because ultimately, while like I have major problems with it, this is the kind of big, weird swing I never thought Konami was going to take with Silent Hill. And it works. I give Silent Hill to another fucking weird auteur writer and let them do something insane with it. You know, it's exciting. I genuinely feel excited for whatever the next Silent Hill is, and ultimately, I would rather get the like general direction, the general narrative feel and vibe. I would rather they get that right, as opposed to like a competent game with a boring story, or a competent game that is just trying to mimic past Silent Hills, which isn't what F is doing at all. F feels so different and new and cool, and just I loved the story. I wish the game was better. I wish I could have come on here and been like, guys, the game is fucking amazing and everything about it rules. That's not how I feel, but I still loved it enough that, like, you know, this will be one of my favorite games this year. So yeah, in terms of score, I'm gonna put a 4 out of 5 on it. I think that I would love to give this a 5, but I just found the gameplay section such a drag, so I can't. But yeah, that's everything I think about Silent Hill F. Goodbye.